Good afternoon, hello, and welcome to at least the introduction to this press conference for the closing gala of the London Film Festival, The Irishman. There will be a moment or two before the talent arrives, so I'm just going to use those moments for a few little bits and pieces of housekeeping, of which I'm sure you're probably already aware. I mean, first of all, obviously we have to thank the Mayfair Hotel for hosting the press conference. During the press conference itself, could you possibly keep your questions to the London Film Festival and the film itself, if that's possible? Could you also identify yourselves when you ask a question? And we have two roving microphones which will come to you at some point. I'm not sure where they are now, but they'll be there at the moment. So if you could wait for those, as I say, identify yourselves and please only ask one question, because as you can see, there are plenty of people here. There are many people on the stage that you'll want to hear from, and we do only have half an hour. So at the very end, if you could stay in your seats so that we can allow everybody to leave from this door here, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed. And I think it's time now for me to introduce the festival director, Trisha Tuttle.
Is my mic on? Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Francine. This is bucket list stuff for a festival director. Good afternoon and welcome to the press conference for the closing night of the BFI London Film Festival and the international premiere of Martin Scorcese's The Irishman. Raging Bull, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, Casino, Gangs of New York. I could really go on, and it seems perverse to stop when you're talking about masterpieces from Martin Scorsese, but he's done it again with The Irishman. He is also a champion of film culture and preservation, and he's a BFI fellow, so it's a real honour for us to have him here. And the film, for those of you who've seen it, you know it's a complex, ambitious, and deeply satisfying work of cinema. It's also featuring actors working at the top of their game: Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and a really wonderful ensemble cast. There are a few ways that any festival director would want to close the festival than with a Martin Scorsese film. But in this year, when we have seen such incredible cinema across the festival, there really is no other way to close the festival, and we're going to bring down the house tonight. I'm very excited to say that working in partnership with Netflix, who've been really wonderful and supportive of the festival, we're going to go to 80 cinemas UK-wide, and that will be in the UK and Ireland. And yeah, Francine, take it away. Can't wait to listen to it. Thanks, everyone.
So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please now welcome to the stage Director Martin Scorsese. Thank you very much, and welcome. As Trisha said, what an amazing lineup to have here on the stage for this press conference. Just before I throw it open to the questions from the press, I wondered, rather than go down asking you all individual questions, this is something that I'm sure everybody will have something to say about, which is, in some ways, we look at this lineup along here and we say, why did it take so long? You've known each other decades, and I know this project has been in your mind for a while, in one way or another. So give us a little bit of context as to how The Irishman comes together.
Well, it goes back to some special work that Bob and I were involved in for 20 some odd years. We were trying to get another project going based on, I don't know, our tenure in Hollywood, so to speak, in the 70s and the 80s, and that developed into something else, and we never quite settled on the project. And the last time we really worked together was in 1995, Casino. And so from that point on, we would always check with each other what we were doing, whether I could fit into his plans and vice versa. And ultimately, we did get involved. What was it, Bob? The Winter of Frankie Machine?
Yeah.
The project?
Yeah. And
I mean, too enthusiastic about it, sorry. We decided we had to do something. I think it was around 2010. No, 2008.
yeah.
2007.
2007, right? And so we decided it's enough time. We couldn't settle on something, so this is a project that we thought we would have some possibilities. I was really looking for something that with Bob to enrich more or less where we had gone in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. I mean, to just replicate what we had tried to do in the beginning of our careers wouldn't be anything, wouldn't be enriching in any way. And so you were about to direct The Good Shepherd, and Eric Roth was writing that, and Eric, knowing that we were trying to do something called Frankie Machine about a hitman who'd retired, Eric gave you a book called I Heard You Paint Houses by Charles Brandt for research.
Yeah, we were talking about it. He said he just read it and it had just come out, and I said, oh, I got to read that book. And then when Marty and I were preparing, so that was about 2 years earlier than when Marty and I were committed to Frankie Machine, and Marty was starting to show me films like Jean
Gabin film like Touche pas au Grisby and Melville's Dulot and Le Deuxième Souffle and pictures like that, get a sense of the Gabin character, because by the time you were doing Casino, I felt that presence was similar.
And then I said, well, I have to read this book that I've been always wanting to read called I Heard You Paint Houses, and so I did read it just as research for the character, and then after I read it, I got together with Marty and I said, you got to look at this, and because I think this is what you're going to want to do. So that was it.
And well, Jane, you had the story about on the telephone with Brad Gray, right?
So we were ready to commit. Bob and Marty were ready to commit to making Frankie, the Winter Frankie Machine, and it was going to be financed by Paramount, Brad Gray, and we were all on a call together, and Brad was going to give us the green light, and in the middle of this conversation, Bob said, well, there's this other book that we're thinking about, and it could be research. Maybe we could combine these two movies. And Brad said, oh, so you're thinking, so you want to take a Go movie and turn it into a development project? And you kind of heard everybody go, mm-hmm. So anyway, that was 2007, and then we brought Steve Zalian on, and Steve delivered. Steve and Marty and Bob worked together, and we had optioned I Hear You Paint Houses. The Machine went away, and Steve delivered a script in 2009.
Yeah. I mean, the point is that we were trying to find something that we felt right with. I don't know how you define right. It's ambiguous and kind of we felt comfortable with in a way, and something we couldn't articulate it. And once he described this character to me, I felt that he had a good sense of it, and I said, well, this is maybe where we could really try to explore and see what we could come up with, and it might really be of value ultimately for us as creative partners working together and getting Al involved, getting Joe Pesci involved, and the rest of the cast. And so we took a chance and got Steve Zalian. And Zalian and I, pulled together a wonderful script, and then it took a number of years because why?
Well, Steve wrote the script, which was terrific, wonderful, as Marty says, and then it was a matter of getting everybody's schedules to line up. And Marty was doing Hugo. I remember coming over here, I don't know when you were doing Hugo.
2009, 2010, I think, yeah.
And we were talking about that and how to, what we were gonna do and his availability, and he wanted to do silence and so on. And then I had said to Marty, I wanted to make sure he was okay if we would just let it out there when we talk on interviews. And usually I'm very superstitious about that, because when you talk about it, it usually doesn't happen. But I thought maybe in this case, since we had no backers, no people really interested, the idea that we were doing it with Al and Joe, that I cleared it with Marty, and then I talked to Joe and then Al about they're okay, and he mentioning that they're on board. So we did that, and then we had a reading of the script. I don't know what year that was.
The reading of the script was right before, January, right before you left to go do silence. We had this one opportunity to get everyone together, and we taped a reading. 2012. I personally believe that was all we would have of the Irishman, because it was so difficult to get financing. And then when everybody heard it, there was a new energy, but Marty and Emma went off to shoot silent, so we had another delay, a good one.
So if I can bring Al Pacino in here. Jimmy Hoffa. So, I mean, what was your initial reaction to the idea of playing Jimmy Hoffa?
It's me you're talking to?
It is you.
Well, it was, first I've known Marty and Bob very long time, and so when Bob came to me, called me about it, and it sounded really interesting, and the opportunity to work with them was, it was very important to me. I really wanted to, for years we almost worked together, Marty and I, at different things, and of course Bob and I have worked together. I mean, we've known each other since we were young actors. So we worked together, so it was a good thing.
The first meeting we had about this with you, Al, was we talked about it in a hotel in LA.
Oh, that's right, the hotel, yes.
Yeah.
So coming back to me, right?
Long ago. But the thing was, after the discussion, we talked a little bit, and then he looked at us and he said, "Is this going to happen?" Because the complications of schedules, and then of course, no real enthusiasm, to say the least, about financing, really, it made it, something that is a nice dream, but we were pretty clear, as you said, Jane, that maybe the reading was going to be the only time you'd have heard it or seen it, and we knew that going in, but somehow we pursued.
But I think that reading was very well orchestrated. Yes. I think Bob did it, they arranged it so that, I guess you would say, the right kind of people were there to listen to it, and that was a very affecting.
Yeah, they got excited about that. They still didn't give us the money.
I didn't know about that part.
There's actually nobody in the room that could really give us the money, but it was really good.
No, from good word of mouth. Yeah. Even Steve Zalian came in, and I remember it was you, Al, Bob, Bobby Cannavale, Paulie Herman.
Joe was there too.
Joe Pesci, Stephanie Katsirba, who plays Bob's wife in the film. Yeah, it was kind of an enjoyable reading.
You could feel it though in the room.
Yeah.
You could feel that there was something, there was a live wire there. It had life to it. So I always thought that it would happen, but then there was a period I thought, no, I don't think so.
Well, I get a call from time to time from Al, is it gonna happen, is it gonna happen? I said, don't worry, just hold on. We're working on it.
Well, thank goodness it did, because the result is fantastic. Time for some questions from you. Oh, so many hands. Okay, lovely. Let's, where are those microphones? There's one there. Okay, can we get this straight away down here, please, first, and then
we can get another microphone over here as well, and then we'll go to that. Thanks. Okay.
Hello, Kat Andriaco from Free Cinema. I just saw the film. It was mind-blowing. It was one of those old epic things that make you lucky to be in the cinema and watching it. So thank you so much for all of you for that. The question is, this is obviously a Netflix production, and it's coming out very shortly after it's run in the cinemas. And it seems like a good collaboration at the moment between TV or internet companies with films, with the film industry. And there are of course some people who are naysayers. So what would you think? Will we need to at some point redefine perhaps what is cinema?
Well, you're looking at me. I think we're redefining it now in such a way. I think it's not just an evolving of cinema, but it's a revolution. I mean, it's even bigger than the revolution that sound brought to cinema. It's the revolution of cinema itself, like 120 years ago, 115 years ago. It's a new, and we say the new technology, we bring in the things that are unimaginable, and how not only is it something extraordinarily good for narrative films, put it that way, narrative stories told with emphasizing motion picture images, but it opens up a whole the original conception of what a film is and where it's to be seen has now changed so radically that we may have to say, okay, let's say there's a certain kind of film that's made here. There might be obviously virtual reality films, there's holograms, there's all sorts of things that are going to be coming that we really know. So in effect, one thing that will never, something that should always be protected as much as possible, and I think will always be there, is a communal experience. And I think that's best in a theater. Now, homes are becoming theaters too, but it's a major change. And I think one has to keep an open mind, you know. There's no doubt, like seeing a film with an audience is really, really important. There is a problem though, in that you have to make the film, and we run out of room in a sense. There was no room for us to make this picture, and even for many different reasons, I guess, and ultimately there was a financial issue too in terms of the CGI that we did, and the reason why we went to CGI is kind of complicated because at a certain point, if I made the film earlier, they could have played younger, and then at a certain point we missed that, and then they said, well, use younger actors to play them younger, and I said, well, what's the point of that, and back and forth, and finally the CGI, we tried it and said, well, let's see, let's experiment, open it up. I mean, CGI, and to that extent, is really an evolution of makeup. Really. You know, you accept certain norms in makeup. You know that he's not that old, she's not that young, but you accept that as a norm. I mean, you accept the illusion, so to speak. Taking that and having the backing of a company that says, you know, you will have no interference, you'll make this picture as you want. The trade-off is it streams with theatrical distribution prior to that. I figured that's the chance we take on this particular project. You know, what streaming means and how that's going to define a new form of cinema, I'm not sure. I thought for a while maybe long-form TV is cinema. It's not. It simply isn't. You know, it's a different viewing experience. You could look at 3 episodes, 2, 4, 10. You know, one week, second episode the second week. That's not. It's a different kind of thing. So there's got to be still, what has to be protected is the singular experience of experiencing a picture, ideally with an audience, you know. But there's room for so many others now, and so many other ways, and there's going to be crossovers completely. The value, I don't know, the value of a film that's like a theme park film, for example, the Marvel type pictures, where the theaters become amusement parks. That's a different experience, and it's not even, I was saying earlier, it's not cinema, it's something else. You know, whether you go for that or not, but it is something else, and we shouldn't be invaded by it. And so that's a big issue. That's a big issue. And we need the theater owners to step up for that, you see, to allow theaters to show films that are narrative films. A narrative film could be one long take for 3 hours too, you know. It doesn't have to be everybody, it doesn't have to be a conventional beginning, middle, and end. But anyway, if that answers your question, I'm okay.
Emma and Jane, anything you want to add to that, as the people have to find the money to do this? You don't have to, it was only if you wanted to.
What was the question?
It was about really how whether cinema has reached a point where it's changing, when you've got the option of having streaming, as it were in this case, the Netflix option.
What he said.
Right.
The one point to add to what Marty said is that it will be in theaters, and even when it goes on platform,
right.
it still will continue to be in theaters. So audiences have their choice of whether they're going to watch it in theater and have an amazing cinema community experience, or they want to watch it on the platform. Roma, for example, is still in theaters,
still in theaters somewhere in the world, yeah.
around the world. So again, it's the audience has the choice of how they want to view something, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Thank you. Yes, next question.
In a sense, Mr. Scorcese leading on, Helen Barlow from Australia and covering for Portugal as well. Hi. Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America that starred Mr. De Niro was a film perhaps more similar to this one. Do you think that there are any references to that film here, in that it's a long film and not as perhaps action-packed as your earlier gangster films? Because I think your earlier gangster films were very different to this.
Well, in this underworld milieu, yeah, I mean, well, I guess the similarity is it's very long and Bob is in it. I love Leone, but there was no way that I was thinking I was doing Sergio. There's no way. I can't do that. You know, I just intuitively made the movie, and I said, oh, Bob, when we were trying to get the raise the finance, I said, I know how to do this. I said, I have a thought. I know how to follow it through. And I just went with that.
But how is it different to your earlier gangster films, though?
How does it relate to them? Well, you know, back in 1973, we were 29, 30 years old. Now, we're much older. And so we hope that maybe the vantage point of time, that something has evolved and maybe deepened to a certain extent about life, really. And if that could be conveyed in the story and the performances and the way the film is put together, and that would be some sort of advancement, rather than just replicating what we had done in the past.
Thank you.
Hi guys, Thomas Cross here from FM104 in Ireland, and I just want to say, what did it feel like looking at yourselves younger for the first time when you were looking back at the movie? Was it a bit crazy?
Well, considering everything is crazy, it was crazy. I don't know quite what you mean, though. I'm sorry. What are you saying?
Like just with the new technology and all that, like this opens up everything that anyone can play, anyone or anything now. Does it open up a brand new world for everyone?
Well, I don't feel that way personally. I mean, but maybe it does for, you know, this is a technique that's early on, you know, it's being formed. It's like what they have said, it's a form of makeup, you know, and it could change things, and but I don't think you feel that way as an actor. I think you feel that as an actor, you're playing a role, and a role that more than likely, hopefully, you're suited for. And so when you do that, all bets are off, really. I mean, it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter what you look like. You know, this is sort of true in a way, because I saw the film. Remember, you showed it to me. They showed it to me without anything,
Mm-hmm.
and I just went with it, and I didn't think anymore that this was a story. It was so handled in such a way. It was delivered in such a way, directorially, visually, cinema, costumes, everything, and also the acting. And so I felt that was what was picking me up.
Mm-hmm.
A story. I wasn't thinking about anything else
Mhm.
after a while. I mean, I didn't even think about it when it first started. Of course, it was me. I'm a little I wasn't thinking about the lines in our faces or anything. I just was accepting these people. They existed too. That's another thing. This was an interesting thing to try with, because it's a story about real things that happen, people who really lived, and I don't know, maybe that had something to do with in my reaction to it. So this whole thing to me is innovative, of course, but at the same time, you tell a story, and in the end, that's what I'm a little bit more. I'm a little more concerned about that. And as I say, I did see the film without any work, or any, what do you call this stuff?
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. And it was fine. As a matter of fact, I'm not the only one who felt that way.
Yeah.
Other people who had seen it before it
No.
happened.
I mean, unless you're looking for it, right? You say, oh, there it is, and then.
I think it's really good that we have that in the film, that we have this potential, and it's exercised in the film. It's stating what it's stating. In the old days, they put, some actor that we all knew and loved, and they put gray hair on him, and you'd say, oh, he got older. But you'd accept it, you'd accept it because it was makeup, and you went with it because it was in the story. I don't know what, I'm going too far here. I feel as though I've dug a hole for myself, something. I don't even know what. I'm sorry.
Do you want to say a little about when you saw yourself?
Yeah. I always joke that my career will be extended another 30 years. No, it's a whole interesting thing, because where it will evolve, as far as, I was just thinking about copyrights and later and new and likeness and this and who gets it after we're all long gone, families and stuff like that. I mean, they even have that now in some ways with using famous actors from years ago in commercials who have created a certain whatever, that they represent what that product is, whatever. So all that stuff. I don't know. I'm just happy we're at the beginning stages of it really being explored, and God knows where it'll go.
Yeah.
And what excited me about it was that Pablo Hellman was doing this thing and wanted to make it state of the art, the best it could be to date, and that was an ambition for this movie, which was ambitious always, all the time. It fit the whole thing. Yeah.
See, it's also how we move.
Yeah, well,
It's a
that
big
too.
thing.
Yeah.
How you move. These are the little things in there. You're going along looking pretty, and then you go to get up, and so someone would come by us and just say, "Hey, man, what are you doing? You're 39."
Yes, good.
Hi, I'm Marcel from Geekpol, Germany, and my question goes to all three of you. what was the biggest challenge for each one of you on this movie? For you directing, for you playing your characters?
What was the biggest
Challenge.
challenge? Yeah, it was making the movie. It was a big challenge, yeah, because, I mean, in terms of Bob and Alan, you know, you guys, they're performing. Me, I can't speak for them, but for me, it's cutting through all the issues of how you perceive a story, the sweep of a story, what's essential to get and what isn't essential, and making those editing choices right there on set. First of all, even before set, before shooting begins, and make those editing choices, and in shooting even tougher on those editing choices because it's a very complex picture, complex in terms of technology too. And staying close, staying on point in a way, staying on the what's essential to the story, and those are the characters, particularly Frank's character, and eliminating everything else around that was getting in the way. And this, I think, was a 108-day shoot. So this is something, and then in the editing too. So it's wrangling the picture in a way. They call it wrangling, you know. And always threatening to run a little bit out of control, but grabbing it again, and using Frank Sheeran as the anchor for the whole picture until finally you wind up with him alone. And that's what it's all been about. I mean, that's just general about how you make a movie. Other ways, sometimes you make a movie, you don't know what you're going to do when you get there on the set. I tried that once, it didn't work. For me, it didn't work. And I usually like planning and fighting my way through the whole process, you know, until we get as best we can to the end result. But you guys with the character.
Yeah, and certain things, with like Marty, we would, every so often I would come in to narrate pieces that Marty figured that we had to sort of, voice over to give information or whatever, or sort of tightens,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
and that's a normal part of making a movie. And this,
Yeah, you even went into the audio tracks, the tracks of Frank Sheeran's actual voice,
Yes.
the stories, and every now and then we go and we pick, you
yeah.
tell me something, and so, yeah, it's interesting, and we fool around with that and try to find time to shoot it in the film. I'd give it to Emma and tell her, could you find some production time, please?
I'd say yes.
Yeah.
So was that your biggest challenge, Emma?
Mhm.
Helping Marty realize everything
We try, yeah, and also.
Because you want them to, all of them to have the time specifically, you
It's
know,
the time is the problem. Yeah.
to create and the environment and the quiet, safe sort of space for them to do, and you don't wanna rob them of that at all. So it's a challenge, but we have phenomenal partners, Netflix, the best, and we carved out that time and space, I hope.
Hello, Eloise from Strand Magazine. Congratulations on the film, it was fantastic. So I just wanted to ask you guys, why do you think that we are constantly pulled back into talking about films about pain and trauma, and as in The Irishman, there's a lot on macro level with the president's assassination, etc. But it really does go into personal, individual pain. I was just wondering why you think that is.
Why do you think pain is important to storytelling?
Exactly.
Pain, suffering, that idea, what makes an interesting story? I mean, what do you think, guys?
Well, I mean, this was a simple story. It was about a guy who was caught between two people who were powerful people, and one of them was disappeared. We never knew what happened to him really to this day. The other one was also the Joe Gallo, referring to him. You still don't know who did that to him. It had that to hang on in some ways, this political, this grand story with these historical, if you want, type characters, and a simple story.
And also, Bob, in terms of that, when you're talking about these guys, and then on the other level, you have JFK, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. You've got all this going on, and nobody knows really what happened there. And I always say, would it make any difference now if we knew exactly who, when, how, and where? No. It's the dark forces that take over that are always present. And these guys are right in the middle of it, in a way. They just walk by the TV and there's missiles coming from Cuba. You know, so, and that's your afternoon lunch. You know, so yeah, I mean, that, when you say the simple story, that was the thing, to hold on to the simplicity of it, because the rest is so complicated.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Stephen Pate. I'm just wondering, I mean, this film for me in many ways is about like reflection. I was wondering, with your kind of amazing careers that's kind of ingrained into the kind of fabric of sort of cinema, do you guys ever sort of sit back and reflect, or do you always look towards the next project? And also, I was just wondering, I'm bad.
We're hanging on. We're just wondering what. Okay. It's the second part of the question. That was the good part.
So I'm quite nervous about the legends. All right, so do you think you only could have made this film now because you've lived kind of full of lives, that you're now in a position where you can kind of, you're in a position, better place to sort of understand the texture of this narrative?
You mean that we could have made this film earlier, would have been different? Well, yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, it's like I think it isn't. We all got. It isn't. I don't think we all got together and said, "Let's make a movie and reflect." You know, we were sitting in the trailer. This is like suddenly, as I say, it's intuitive. You know, and I think, well, Bob, Al, you know,
Yeah. It was a movie that evolved. It would have. I mean, could it have been done earlier? Yes, but the story came out at a certain point. The book came out. That took so many years to evolve. We actually had problems getting the rights to the story. There was a lot of confusion there too. That took a bit of time, and everything. I mean, when you always see these movies, that especially in the old days, they'd have 15 years in the making, finally on the screen. This is what it's all about. That's what it is. You know.
Legal and
everything, legal, schedule, actors, availability, director, everybody, the whole thing. It's, but we're just happy that we were able to make it, and I had a great time. I would have shot for another 5-6 months with Marty.
Yeah.
Well, sadly, time is actually the question here. I'm really sorry to those of you who have not managed to ask a question, but I want to thank you for the questions there were, and particularly to thank our panel for their magnificent and moving film. So, thank you.